South Carolina, a state known for its southern charm, rich history, and beautiful landscapes. But it's also home to one of the most notorious and sadistic serial killers in American history, Donald Pee Wee Gaskins. Known as the Grim Reaper of Savannah, Gaskins left behind a trail of bodies, deception, and fear. A man who manipulated everyone around him, hiding in plain sight until his reign of terror came to an end. Pee Wee Gaskins wasn't just a killer. He was a master manipulator, a criminal mastermind, and a figure whose crimes sent shockwaves through the Carolinas, Georgia, and beyond. This is the shocking story of how he evaded capture, controlled the narrative, and ultimately faced justice for his monstrous deeds. Donald Gaskins was born in 1933 in the small town of Gresham, South Carolina, to a young, unwed mother. From the start, his life was filled with violence and neglect. Raised by his grandmother, Gaskins experienced severe abuse and poverty. By the time he was a teenager, he had already developed a taste for violence, which manifested in disturbing ways. Gaskins' first known crime occurred at the age of 12 when he was sent to a reform school after he sexually assaulted a younger child. It was in this school that he began to develop his ruthless and manipulative nature. Within the system, Gaskins quickly learned how to exploit others, using his charm to manipulate those around him while simultaneously becoming more violent and dangerous. While in prison, Gaskins was not just a predator, he was a figure of control. He managed to charm and manipulate his way through the ranks, gaining a reputation for being resourceful, ruthless, and cunning. His manipulation of fellow inmates would continue throughout his life. In the 1970s, Gaskins' violent tendencies escalated. It was around this time that he committed his first confirmed murder. A young couple whom he lured with promises of work, only to kill them brutally in a secluded part of South Carolina. Gaskins quickly found that murder gave him power, control, and satisfaction. Over the next decade, his killings became more frequent and more horrific. He took a sadistic pleasure in torturing his victims before killing them. Gaskins' pattern was disturbing. He often lured victims, usually women, young men, or other vulnerable people, and made them believe they were safe before executing them in cold blood. His reign of terror was methodical and deliberate, as he increasingly felt invincible. By 1975, he had already murdered multiple people, but it wasn't until 1982 that the investigation into his crimes began to take shape. Gaskins' sadism reached a disturbing climax in 1982 when he began to target young girls. One of his most infamous victims, Janet DeCola, was murdered in a manner so brutal it shocked even seasoned law enforcement. Gaskins had a twisted habit of arranging his victims in specific, almost ritualistic ways, which heightened the fear and confusion surrounding the case. The community was gripped with fear as more bodies appeared along roadsides and in wooded areas. Gaskins' ability to blend in, to use charm, and to manipulate made it incredibly difficult for authorities to identify him as the primary suspect. The police were looking for a monster, but they didn't know who he was. By 1985, authorities had linked several of the bodies to Gaskins through the trail of witnesses, records, and odd clues he'd left behind. Gaskins had a collection of disturbing photographs, gruesome images of his victims, which he used to brag about his killings to fellow inmates. By the mid-1980s, Gaskins was no longer able to evade suspicion. He was arrested in 1985 after a series of questionable interactions with police. After his arrest, he was initially uncooperative, denying any involvement in the murders. However, police found tangible evidence linking Gaskins to multiple murders, including photographs of victims and statements from individuals who had witnessed him at various crime scenes. The investigation quickly zeroed in on him as the prime suspect. But what really made Gaskins stand out as a true monster was his ability to manipulate the media, turning his own violent acts into an almost cult-like narrative where he was both feared and respected. In 1986, Gaskins went on trial for the murder of multiple victims, including Janet DeCola, Miriam Williams, and several young women found along the coast. During his trial, Gaskins's manipulative tendencies were on full display. He attempted to charm the jury and downplay his sadistic nature, but the evidence against him was undeniable. Psychological profiles painted Gaskins as a man driven not only by greed and power, but also by an insatiable need to control others. Forensic psychologists noted that Gaskins had a deep-rooted fear of rejection and felt empowered by violence. This psychological profile matched his behavior, a combination of sadism, narcissism, and a profound lack of empathy for his victims. On September 6, 1992, after spending several years on death row, Pee Wee Gaskins was executed by lethal injection. His execution marked the end of one of the most disturbing serial killing sprees in South Carolina's history. However, the echoes of his crimes would continue to reverberate. The death of Gaskins brought some closure, but the full impact of his life and crimes would never be fully understood. Even as he sat on death row, Gaskins continued to manipulate, writing letters to the media, confessing to more murders, and adding complexity to the public's understanding of his sick psyche. The legacy of Gaskins is one of manipulation, brutality, and endless suffering. His manipulations and twisted ego marked him as one of America's most feared criminals, but it also made him a subject of dark fascination. And as we reflect on his life, one question remains unanswered. How many more victims did Pee Wee Gaskins leave in his wake, and will the full truth of his reign of terror ever truly be known? What do you think fueled Gaskins' terrifying spree? Like this video if you believe justice was finally served. Comment below with your thoughts on how manipulative behavior played a role in his actions. Subscribe to Quick Crime Vault for more chilling deep dives into the world's most notorious killers. Share this video to keep the memory of his victims alive and ensure their stories are never forgotten.